So, when I was a junior in high school, I decided to take AP Physics 1, which dealt with pretty simple topics like Newton's second law and like energy conservation. And then next year, I decided to take AP Physics C, which honestly dealt with pretty much the exact same things, except it was just a little bit harder math. So I decided to take both the AP exams and then eventually make it my major in college. And I was feeling pretty confident in that decision considering I got a 4 on the AP Physics C exam. But when I got accepted to my physics department at my university, our advisor strongly recommended that we take physics again with the college instructors. I'll be honest, personally, I felt a little bit underprepared when going to college. And I felt that maybe taking physics again with the university instructors and like a college environment might help me better prepare later on in the future when we got to harder subjects. And similarly, I kind of felt that taking these classes in the AP style, environment, and model that they currently teach it in wasn't the best way for me to learn the information. So I ended up deciding to take the classes again. And after reading this paper, which I'm going to start talking to you about in just a little bit, I realized that the AP model isn't really a good fit for most people. Before I start talking about why AP physics classes aren't the best way to teach students physics, we do have to keep in mind some unintended biases that may arise from the paper. And there are 2 to be specific. So first is the idea that these research experiments were conducted in physics classes only. There are other papers that talk about a broader perspective on just AP and College Board as a whole, but this research paper is specific to how we were teaching physics students. And second is the idea that this research was conducted on a pool of students that were from Stanford, which is a pretty highly selective university. But even still, we can suss out some pretty interesting ideas even though we're looking at a relatively small sample size of students. So another thing we need to worry about when we're talking about this research paper is if we're trying to figure out how good AP physics is, we need to compare it to something. And what this research paper compares AP physics to is something called the FMCE, which stands for the Force and Motion Conceptual Evaluation. Just a quick breakdown of what it is. It's essentially just another multiple choice test for physics that's used to evaluate basic conceptual misunderstanding in physics students. So you may think it's just another version of an AP physics exam. Like, what's the difference between looking at the score on the FMCE and looking at the score on the AP physics exam if they're just going to be multiple choice? In fact, the AP physics exam has free response questions and the FMCE standardly doesn't. The difference is that the FMCE relies a lot more on conceptual understanding than the AP exam does. And we'll get to why that's important, but we need to keep that in mind. So that's why it's a pretty widely accepted litmus test for figuring out like the level that AP physics students are at when coming into college. So that's what we're comparing to. If you don't like that, then I don't know what else to tell you, but that's what we're doing. All right, that's not what I did, that's what they did. I don't know that much, but they do. When looking at a breakdown of the FMCE scores, researchers saw that AP students coming out of high school had the exact same amount of knowledge on average as high school students who didn't take an AP physics class. I don't know how you feel about that, but for me, I'm pretty disheartened by that information. Why did I seemingly sink so much time into this weighted class and spend so much effort to make sure I got a good score in the AP physics exam when I essentially just came out with the exact same amount of knowledge as some student who took their regular physics class and got an easy A and just goofed around the whole time? It's honestly mind-boggling to me. I'm sure you and I would both expect that any student in an AP class, but especially these AP physics classes, would come out of their high school career knowing, or at least having a deeper understanding of the stuff that they're learning than some student who took a regular physics class. And that the AP scores themselves would be a pretty good indication about how well physics students would do on the FMCE. But what's even more interesting is, I didn't mention this, But they also compared scores on the SAT to their AP scores in the FMCE. And they found that students' math SAT scores and their FMCE scores had more correlation than their AP exam scores. And what's even more terrible, in my opinion, is the fact that AP scores had no correlation whatsoever to your final class grade in college. And like I said, this only really talks about AP physics classes. But there have been other research papers that have been written. So that really gets me wondering if we can really still consider AP physics courses to be on the same level as introductory college courses when looking at these different papers talking about these AP exam scores and the grades that we get in the classes. So now going back to the FMCE and the AP scores, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the physics. And although I'm digging a little bit deeper into specific physics, I'm not going super in depth. I'm going to throw pretty quick videos on the side that you guys can go to if you're at least a little bit interested in what I'm talking about and what I think are pretty helpful videos for somebody who's just starting out or is at least a little bit interested in a little bit more than what I'm talking about. So when digging a little deeper, researchers found strong correlations for questions that dealt with things like force and acceleration, or maybe the fact that speed is somehow your velocity is somehow related to your kinetic energy, or the fact that your height determines how much gravitational potential energy you have somehow. But there were really no correlations at all when we were looking at questions that talked about things dealing with Newton's third law. And honestly, what's even worse is the fact that a majority of the students got every question wrong that related to vectors in some way. And unfortunately, this is pretty strong evidence that our AP classes have really just become plug and chug classes. So plug and chug is the idea that you have some equation, like this one for example, and you're given everything in the problem except for A. And the whole goal is just to solve for A. Now, that's a relatively simple exercise because all you have to do is take v naught squared and subtract the 2 to the side, and then take the 2 and the delta x and then divide it, and then you get an equation for A, and then you just plug in the numbers and you're good to go. But that's just an exercise in math. It's not real physics. This equation that we're looking at actually describes how our world works. It tells a story for the motion. The V's are velocities and the A's are accelerations and the delta X stands for some distance that we're traveling. And I don't know why there's a 2 there, but there has to be a 2 there for some reason. Why the heck would there be a 2 there in the first place? And why are they squared? Why does this equation describe the world? And that's the real root of physics. Why this makes sense. And trying to suss out if we ourselves can begin to describe things using math. The emphasis on plug and chug being the tool to be successful in AP physics could be a strong reason why math SAT scores were so much better at predicting FMCE scores than AP was. And it's honestly pretty insane to think about a college class running like this, because when you start to get to college, you realize that not everything's plug and chug anymore. So after talking about these topics for a couple minutes, it's probably pretty easy to see why college physics is so much better than an AP physics course, but we still can't be entirely sure and pinpoint specifically why that's the case. I'll be honest, there could be millions of different reasons why college physics is better than high school physics. Just to name a couple, it could be the age that we're taking physics in high school at may be too young. It might be the fact that we don't really get introduced to really solid physics until we're sophomores, juniors, seniors in high school. It could be the fact that just high school schedules themselves don't allow for students to flourish like they should, as opposed to their college schedules and their experiences there. It could be the fact that college courses have a lot more funding and a lot more time for lab experiments and equipment. It could just be the fact that your high school teacher isn't super comfortable with teaching physics. So high school physics enrollment only continues to grow and grow, which I think is a good thing. I think every student, at least once in their life, should take some sort of physics course because you can build really useful skills if you get taught right. But less than 50% of high school physics teachers actually have physics degrees, which is completely mind-boggling when you think about social studies and math and English and biology, who all have between 70 and 80% of their teachers with their respective degrees teaching those classes. So yeah, it makes sense why college physics is a lot better than high school. But is that really a good excuse to just leave high school teachers and students just off to fend for themselves? Because I used to be one of those high school physics students, and I wouldn't really appreciate that. And I eventually want to become one of these high school physics teachers, and I still wouldn't really appreciate that. We need to have a conversation about not only what we're teaching in our AP physics classes, but just in AP classes in general, and in just our regular curriculums. Why do we teach things? Why do we value some things as more important than others? So I think with all that being said, this is a really good conversation that we need to be having as a society to really build up high school education. So thanks for listening. I don't even remember what I fucking said. And then, boom, you get what A is. But that's not math. Wait, that is math. That's not math. I fucking read like the first 3 sentences, or not words, and expected to know everything again. This is why you read scripts. Strongly recommended that we take AP Physics. No, I said AP Physics. Lily, can you please stop? You're licking. I feel like you're picking it up. FMCE. Fuck, I keep messing up the M and the C. It's just a multiple choice. I haven't read it at all.